Oh yeah.
There's a little one in the background, just saying. Hi everyone, we're live, and today we have two amazing guests who we love so much, especially since Kora is one of our really, really cool people who is managing the union life. If you're not on it, you should be on it. If Kora, if you want to add the link, that'd be great.
I will.
Cool. So Kora is a relationship and intimacy coach. She is a teacher of orgasmic meditation, and she gets people into their bodies and their hunger so that they can move towards loving them, feeding them, and seeing their beauty from inside out. She has taught on both coasts of the US and in Australia, and she also got scuba certified despite a fear of water, and she is currently flying trapeze. Kevin Strauss was an industry disruptive biomedical engineer who wandered down a rabbit hole 18 years ago and transformed into an emotional health, connection, and human behavior expert. Kevin believes people are yearning to feel closer to others, not to everyone, but to the people who matter most to us. His mission is to help you connect authentically with the people you cherish. He's also the CEO of Uche. I'm going to say it wrong. I'm so sorry.
Sounds good.
A next generation social app rooted in authentic connection and privacy. He also welcomes the opportunity to speak on those topics, especially emotional health and wellness. In his spare time, Kevin is an expedition backpacker, ballroom dancer, an 18-year injury-free, I need help, Ironman triathlete and coach. Union show creator Keith Paulino is a master coach with over 4,000 hours of one-on-one coaching under his belt and has taught over 1,000 students on the subjects of sex, dating, relationships, and intimacy. His main purpose is to help emotionally adolescent adults grow into becoming fully expressed and integrated. My name is Cindy Riak, and I am based in Silicon Valley. I coach startup founders and entrepreneurs increase their relational intelligence so that their investment and connections create the success they're looking for. I'm also a filmmaker, and I tell stories that connect us as beings more deeply. So today we are talking about standing in the face of fear. What does that mean?
What does that mean? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, world. Welcome to the show. This week's topic was, born from a thread full of things about like either being on our loop of self-discovery where kind of something we had seen before comes back around, or there's feeling stuck is another place that kind of inspired the topic today of why do we feel stuck, or how do we get stuck, and things like that. And so standing in the face of fear is like, most of us deal with fear by withdrawing in some form, either non-confronting, dissipating, deflecting. Like there's all these ways that we manage to like not deal with fear, and because a lot of what's going on is our unconscious mind is essentially saying, this thing is imminently dangerous and you have to get out of here. Meanwhile, our conscious aware mind is like, the person just said that they wanted to go to the baseball game. We're like rationally, like there is no imminent actual danger to us. And so it's that schism that has it feel like we're crazy, basically. And so the idea is that one of the things that we do is we practice standing in that fear and feeling it and being with it, so that we can have the evidence of the reality to our unconscious mind. We give our unconscious mind that reality. So we will go around the squares and get everybody's kind of 1 minute viewpoint. And
Hollywood Square.
Right? Seneca Square. Circle.
I'm trying to counteract the babies screaming. I'm so sorry.
It's great. It's just the inside of our mind. Totally fine.
It sounds like my family environment growing up. It just triggers all this stuff. Sorry, keep going.
You're good. So Kora, do you wanna go first?
Yeah, love to. I think this is a great topic, and also one that I felt a little bit of resistance to, for sure. It's very. I think there's something really powerful in the act of standing in the face of fear and like staring down something that has triggered and scared us for a long time. And I feel like this is really pertinent to my life in particular because I kind of started my life with a lot of fear in my sphere, and I was just like super cautious as a child. I was small and didn't have a lot of endurance and was just super timid, and like I was really shy and I was super careful about a lot of things, and so that was very much my introduction to the world. And I was also pretty curious. Like I was still curious and liked like pretty things and like, but like mostly, you know, like small pretty things. I was kind of in that little bubble, and at some point, as a teenager, getting to being an adult, I suddenly realized that I could just like throw myself at things that scared me, and then like it would be this totally transformative experience, and I would feel really different, and it was totally a thrill. And so I've really grown up swinging like from that one extreme of that to the other side, and experiencing both and really start contemplating. I mean, standing in the face of fear is not really either of those things. It's the in between. That's not just like oh, I'm going to be super timid and avoid everything, but it's also not like I'm going to just like attack everything and throw myself in blindly. And yeah, it's the middle in between those things. Was that a minute? Was that long?
Thank you.
Let me tell you my life story.
Kevin?
Yeah, this topic of fear is coming up a lot in the professional world that I'm engaged with. And I actually get really frustrated when people talk about fear, because it's like, oh, fear's a problem. We have too much fear. Fear of what? If we're not defining, like I really struggle when we don't define what it is we're actually afraid of. And when we just talk about fear as this big general feeling, but what are we afraid of? So when I think about fear, for me, it's I want to understand what is the root of that fear. What am I really afraid of? And I think nowadays in first world countries, my little bubble anyway, the fear is not so much of a physical threat anymore. Like the saber-toothed tiger. It's really an emotional fear, and the brain cannot distinguish between physical and emotional pain. So, but it's just going to do whatever it can to react, which is what you were talking about in the beginning there, Keith. So it's how do we react to that fear? And again, the fear now is not so much physical as it is, I think, emotional, not even mental fear, but emotional, which we can get into later in the meeting. So yeah, and then it's really interesting, Corey, you were talking about like back to staying in the middle of it, and I'm trying to think like, where is it that I sit in the middle of fear? And I think for me, it becomes more of a physical thing when I've gone backpacking on like an extended, like multi-week backpacking trip where you just don't know what's coming the next day. And you don't know if you're going to be exhausted. You don't know if there's going to be water. You don't know if the weather's going to come in. So you are just existing in that constant state the whole time. Thankfully, it's always worked out well because I'm here to live and tell about it. But that's just the first thing that came to mind for where I might be able to sit in the middle of my fear. But I'm gonna have to dig into this more as we go through the hour.
Nice, thank you. Cindy, would you like to go next?
You want to go next?
Sharing the show out.
I can go next if you want me to.
Okay, go
ahead. It's so interesting you talked about backpacking. I remember waking up one morning by a lake, and there was like a grizzly bear like literally 20 feet away from our tent. And I was just like, I'm gonna go back in and pretend I'm not here.
Yeah, that is scary stuff though. That's real fear though.
That's real fear, yeah.
That's justified. That's justifiable fear.
So those tigers that might come into your cave and attack you, they can be real.
Yeah.
And I think what Kora was actually talking about earlier was something around discernment, right? It's either what is this fear that I'm holding on to, and is that fear something that I'm creating so that I could stay away from this original experience that I had as a child, or as a very, very young being, that is no longer here in my present reality. And our brains are always looking for evidence of like that reality actually manifesting, and of course we recreate it. So I think if I were to pull it back into my own experience now, fear registers in my body as like a frozenness. I experienced a lot of terror growing up, a lot of hiding from someone who's about to terrorize me and harm me. So when I'm triggered as an adult, I don't even feel the fear because I'm so frozen. And so it's been a long process for me to de-thaw and to finally speak up and say, I didn't like that experience, or learning how to advocate for myself in the face of something unpleasant or not, just doesn't work for me, or is like actually really scary. Like, this does not work. So I think
does that lead to like a lot of anxiety?
Yeah, I'm more on the depressive spectrum. So I shut down and I go into a half sleep state.
Yeah. Man, I just think of it from in terms of like my growth and like being able to see myself as a result of like doing things that I'm afraid of, and like my my relationship to fear has been very much like my relationship to the rest of my emotional spectrum, which is mostly dissociated. Like, there's just like internal ball of emotions that are responding to the sensory input of the world, and I don't really have access to them, and they're still kind of operating on me at the visceral level. And so I was very I was kind of thrown about. It was like a ship in rough seas when it came to my emotions, and so in the last 10 years, just like getting more and more, like becoming a better sailor, and being able to like, oh, there's a storm coming, and like I know how to go into it, and it doesn't mean that the seas won't be rough. It just means that I'll have a better sense of how to, keep afloat inside of the storm, and take care of my ship, prepare it a little bit better for the storm so that stuff doesn't go overboard, and kind of all that. It's a great metaphor. And so that's, my relationship to fear is I'm a non-confronter. Like, I will just find something else to do, and that'll just be happening, and however it goes is however it goes. And and that led to a life that was very much reactive, and I was essentially a victim to my own emotions because I was dissociated from them. They happened, and stuff happened in the world as a result of them, and then I ended up dealing with the aftermath, essentially. So that experience has gotten a lot closer to real time. I think everyone is traveling for Thanksgiving right now, because there was like one of my friends, maybe we've got 2 people watching today. So if you're just joining, welcome to the Union. Real talk about personal growth. Today we're talking about standing in the face of fear. We have our recurring guests. Also, the comments feed is pretty quiet today because our 2 biggest commenters are on the show right now. We got Kora and Kevin on, and I think we're just gonna I think I'm just gonna do this for the
Usually crazy. Yeah. Can I respond to something that Kevin said?
Yeah. There, I just changed to Kindy, so we're all K's.
At least
like
it's 4 instead of 3.
Right? Yeah, I can't have it as 3s. It's not cool.
Just have 3. So Kindy had to change.
That's making me smile really hard. You're muted.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Kindy.
It's all right. I never liked my name, and my mom named me after Cyndi Lauper and was really upset when I became a performer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What I was gonna say, in response to what Kevin was sharing earlier, is that I appreciated the idea of like, don't just like try to get rid of fear, because I think that has been some of like the way that I've interpreted certain messages in personal growth. Mm-hmm. And I've learned to be a little bit more skillful with my fear, I think, and not try to like make it go away immediately and like push against it and fight it so much, which generally just like, makes it more set in, and to have some respect for the way that I work and the fact that I have that instinct and like the way that our psyches, our emotional systems, and especially mine in this case, function, and not try to like be different and not have any fear and fearless. And we all need all of those parts of ourselves, even if we've been like treated badly and had ways of functioning that are don't work very well and don't serve us very much. Mm-hmm. Even have like kind of dysfunctional patterns around them, we still don't need to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. Because they're important and vital, and if we didn't hear, at some point we would actually die young.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it just the ultimate like protective mechanism,
yeah.
for us?
Just like people who can't feel pain die very young.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it's that fear is to avoid the pain, right? And from either the saber-toothed tiger or from the shame of society or your family or the judgment in your family or something. Mm-hmm. it's that pain that we're avoiding, which is okay. That's, avoid the pain.
Yeah, and that's kind of the example that's often brought up when people talk about fear, is the saber-toothed tiger, bear, because we have that instinct developed because of features like that and situations like that, and some of us now go for our whole life without ever once encountering a situation and experiencing.
Well, that's such a great, it's an important piece of this conversation, which is to say, like, we as a species are incredibly adaptive, and part of our adaptability is these survival mechanisms that have served us very well for the first however many 25,000 years, and we just haven't. Is it 200,000?
Yeah, modern humans have been on this planet for 200,000 years.
Yeah.
God, we're still dumb as fuck. Sorry.
Well, we're pretty good at surviving, actually.
Yes, but thriving is really hard.
I agree 100%. Yeah, it's that
why,
thriving.
Right? We're more adapting to what arises rather than planning for the future.
Yeah, Keith was. I think we cut him off.
Well, I mean, it's the same.
Sorry.
I mean, it's the same conversation, right? It's like I think that when life was simpler, when there was a hell of a lot less information coming in, that was a warning light on the dashboard, and we were able to stop and breathe and assess, and is there danger, is there not? When you like multiply that set of information to sort through second by second, by 1 million or 10 million, in terms of like what we've got coming at us, and population density and cars and noise, and like it just our our instincts are just overworked. There's so many people we know that have adrenal fatigue and are overflowed with cortisol and stress hormones, and what that does to us, right? That is all part of who we are. That's all our makeup as humans, and it's what makes us live as long as we have. 200,000 years, goddamn. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty good so far.
Right?
Right.
And so I think
we're self-destructing at this point.
Yeah, let's see us in 50 years and see if we can say the same thing.
Well, to me, that's part of what this show is about, is saying like, hey, there's a means to this thing that can be adjusted so it works for you, and instead of working against you. And what is that, and how do we do it? And so for me, the topic of standing in the face of fear is like, how do you do it? Well, you've got to, one, I have to admit that my fear-based instincts are not accurate. They are traumatized. They are fried. It is a injured nervous system that is there's some disconnect between the visceral sensation and the interpretation of that sensation, in a sense. So even when we say like, oh, I want to heal my nervous system, but really that's false, right? Like we say that a lot in terms of like transformational work and like talking about our nervous system, but unless you've got some physiological issues with the nerve endings, your nervous system is fine. Your mind's response to the stimuli of the nervous system is what's injured.
Well, it's the polyvagal. Okay, just keep going.
Well, what's stimulating? What's the stimulation? What's the stimuli? And I don't just want to guide this conversation, but it's not the physical threat anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't think.
I mean, we can't say that 100%, right? Like
no, not 100%.
Yeah.
But mostly speaking, again, in like first world countries, the threat of survival is not really the big issue anymore.
Right.
And I think what we're afraid of so much is it's the emotional threat. And
Well,
what
it's
go
the
ahead.
perceived emotional threat.
Well, I mean, I don't know how it can be perceived. It can be very real. You know, the amount of, I usually drop it down to 4 basics, where it's shame, judgment, neglect, or rejection. And we're so afraid of any of those, and they happen all the time. You know, I grew up being judged by my parents constantly. I mean, that's what I grew up in.
Right.
And no matter what, it was constant criticism, which is constant judgment. So no matter what I did, it was never good enough. And so then I grow up with this, I'm not good enough. This gets a little off the track of fear, but it's fear of, I think it's this fear of pain. The pain can be real because, again, rejection is a very real feeling and a real pain.
Right, but I think what we're talking about today is the schism between our idea of how painful that thing will be, and so we use the fear warning to avoid the perceived pain and the perceived injury, versus allowing ourselves to experience the actual injury, the actual emotional pain, and have the reality of, one, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, or it is, but more often than not, it isn't. And then have the actual experience, and so that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is the intelligence of experience, right? And so, like, have the wisdom, have the experience of the actual emotional pain, and then give my unconscious mind the evidence to link to my conscious mind, so that this thing that I know isn't imminently dangerous now doesn't flood my system with the same nervous stimuli that an actual danger would have, right? And so I retrain my instincts and my physiology.
Well, I think the actual experience often both is and isn't as terrible as we imagine. Like it may be like, oh, it's not quite as terrible as we imagine, but especially if we're injured around it, if we're traumatized around it in some way, then like even that experience that like touches that thing or hurts a tiny bit triggers some past feeling or like idea that then makes it excruciatingly painful to feel that little bit.
Well, it's all perception, right? Like the way that our brain is structured is, I get a stimulus and it's going to actually activate all the perceptions that the stimulus, it's like I make meaning out of the stimulus because like in the past that stimulus has hurt me. And
right.
So like I just want to be super clear about this because there's like a little bit of like a gray zone that we're going into, and like what we're talking about when it comes to fear, a lot of it is just belief systems, and so much of our beliefs are invisible to us. And
right.
It's just like when that stimulus comes, it is just simply real. And so like there's a part of me that feels like we want to be careful with the languaging because so much of this is like working with belief systems, which is very, very tough. It's like one of the hardest things to move. And at the same time, if I want to have a more adaptive life, how do I do that while still honoring and having compassion for the little one that had these experiences and had to make up these beliefs about the self and the world in order to stabilize the system? Because if that fear isn't installed in you, you would be dead right now. So
well, I think the answer to your question is just simply that we are talking about it in that context. This is something I talk about a lot, and it is never like one of the things I hate on Facebook is these like definitive, these declarative sentence meme posts that are just like, you are this or you're this, or if you either do this or you're this, or like just that whole like one and done mentality, and and it drives me nuts. I know it drives Cindy nuts. And it's that space of like, oh, like why I want this forum is so that we can talk about it in terms of like, oh, this is my experience with it. This is how it worked for me before. This is how my practices changed it. My transformational path has shifted things, and this is maybe what I still struggle with, or something like, like that to me is like, because then anyone who watches this or watches the replay and gets half an hour into the show, gets to at least hear the concept that you just outlined, Cindy. And that might be the first time they're hearing about it. And maybe they can't hear it. That's the other part of these belief systems being as strong as they are. That you sometimes, I have said simple, monosyllabic English sentences to someone and had the person where I had their full attention, and they just like blink and say, "What?" Because your brain would just like, we're going to dump that sentence into the trash and you're going to keep going. Like,
Yeah. Flooded.
all right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
The power of the unconscious mind is truly breathtaking.
Mm-hmm.
So how does fear, so how do we change fear from this, like, where our windshield of our car goes like bright fire engine red with like a yellow X across it, like got like imminent death warning, to like the check engine light or the oil light on the, like, oh, I guess I probably should take care of that soon. Like something might be wrong there. I have to check that out. Not sure.
My fear thing when the light comes on, and like, because we get a warning like at 1,600 miles or something, like oil change, and I'm like, Duncan, you better email those people right now before we get down to 500. So I'm a little bit in that way, but that's a different survival pattern.
Is there a fear of being stranded in the car,
or? I don't have a memory of this, but I got into a really bad car accident when I was a baby. And I was not strapped in. I wasn't in a baby seat. I was on the floor of the car, and it was just my father driving, and we got T-boned, and the car was completely totaled, and it hit my side. So I have a weird thing with cars, and Duncan hates it when he drives, and I'm in the passenger seat because I'm a backseat driver. So definitely a lot of, what's going on? Why didn't you signal when you did that? So I'm a lot like that.
Were you injured in that car accident?
I don't know, but every single chiropractor that's worked with me said that I had a lot of, there's a lot of stuff on my spine from an early age that they try to fix. So my parents didn't get me checked out. So, well, it was illegal what he did, just stuck me on the floor. So.
Wow.
Not the safest. Yeah, I think I was saying the thing about how like the experience can be not as bad as expected, and or just as bad because of our reaction, because of it. And I think that stepping into having that experience and like noticing it as much of the reality as it is, the reality of it is still a really useful experience, because a lot of us do like avoid, which is what I did when I was a kid, like avoid that experience and avoid that experience and avoid that experience, like whatever the thing is we fear, we're like, oh, that's going to be bad, I'm going to make sure that I don't come in contact with it. And we can do that with quite a lot of things. We can do that for a really long time, if we're able to avoid it, and never experience, oh, like this is what it was actually like, which is why it was really powerful for me when I was like, oh, I can just like throw myself into things. That it was a big shift for me to swing to the other extreme. And I think was really like gave me a lot of good learning that was really helpful in a lot of ways, although not in all ways, because it was like, oh, I don't have to stay in that box of avoiding all these things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, you know, where the embracing whatever that experience is, that it's not as bad as what we thought it was, and it's everything that we thought it would be. Man, there's just so much good stuff going on in here. I don't know where to begin again, but I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just lost my train of thought on that one.
You're good. You can take it in it and see if you can get it back. We got.
Well, it's that, you know, being in that experience and not, and I feel like I really feel like you're onto something there, Kora, because I feel like with maybe the physical threats, which I keep going back to this, that yeah, that experience is bad. You know, I broke my leg, I broke my arm, whatever, you know, I got a laceration. That really sucked. But on the other side on the emotional side of things, when I've allowed myself to experience that, like whatever, getting up in front of an audience and speaking, whether it's in school or, you know, as a professional and all, yeah, you get through it, and it's not that bad. And even if you do make a mistake, you're not going to die. You can learn from it.
Well, I think that varies for different people. Like for some people, it might be a really traumatic experience, at least the next time you have it, without doing some work with it.
True. And then how does the perception of your perception of that experience, which is what Cindy was talking about, I think that really does come into play a lot.
Yeah, especially like if we think about like how our system copes with anything, if the trauma hasn't been dealt with, we were talking about David Goggins before the show, and what you want to do is get up on stage and do public speaking, but every single time you go on, you have another panic attack, which reasserts the trauma. Then the work is not getting on stage. The work is sitting down with a therapist or something, you know.
Or giving a presentation to your two best friends. Like going in smaller steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's still moving that direction and having experiences.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it always comes back to, what do you want? You actually want to go on stage? Then let's work on that. But if it's not on your map to like, oh yeah, I want to be a public speaker, then work on something that you do want.
Right, because you don't have to do that.
and there's going to be fear no matter what. And then you'll get on the other side.
For me, it often takes smaller steps than I expect. Like,
yes, that's something I need to learn. I'm like, oh shit.
Like, it's like, let me, like, in that example, it would be like, oh, let me get together like 20 friends and like speak in front of them, and then it still feels the same as speaking in front of a room like more people. Like 20 people is a lot of people, and like maybe the first step is like giving a presentation to a bunch of stuffed animals. Like they're really small steps.
Yeah, I mean, really this is something my therapist talks about, because fear is just one of, obviously, the many emotions that are triggering that we don't want to have or don't want to feel, essentially. And those of us who are on some kind of personal growth journey are essentially on a feelings journey. And so one of the things that I try, like when I work with clients, is we get to, like, if there's like something going on. So I've got this one client who is getting a divorce, and he's in the last year, just really stepped into a personal growth path. And I'm like, hey man, like, he's like, yeah, every time I think about it, it just like, and it just overwhelms me. I was like, cool, but you don't have to throw yourself head first into it. Like, you can set a timer and see if you can be with the feeling of it without thinking about it, but just be with the feeling of it for 10 seconds. And we started at 30 seconds and worked our way down to 10 seconds, and that was like right at the edge of like how long he could actually be with it. Sometimes closer to 5. And it is like really chunking down how we take steps around fear, all of our emotions, but fear is such like, I don't want to feel that, I don't want to have that experience, I don't want to feel the pain, I don't want to all the bad things, I don't want them in my life. And yet it's ludicrous for us to think that we can control that, that we control it by dissociation, and then we end up not living, essentially, like we're not here.
Yeah, feeling it really is the thing, like the meat of it. It's not like some magic process to get rid of it immediately. Like it's that chunking down and feeling it and taking small enough steps.
It's feeling out the ecology of it, like what is generating this, and what am I going to lose, like what's stopping me from letting go. And like the thing that's stopping me is actually still really valuable for the system. So it's yes and, like it's safety. Wanting safety is a real thing. And and in my own system, I celebrate and I desire so much freedom for myself. And it's taken me years to not shame the part of myself that really needs safety. And so it's a lot of honoring of all my parts to get to the other side.
Yeah. Parts.
All them parts. They fill up the stadium and they're squabbling and yelling at each other. No wonder I can't function.
Sure are a lot of them. Sure.
But I mean, that's a basic need, though, right? I mean, that feeling of safety, that's just a basic human need. So if we're not honoring that, if we're not nurturing that, we're going to be struggling in some way.
Yeah. One of this is a bit of a turn, but one of the places that I still notice that I struggle to stand in the feeling is like if I'm going to disagree with someone, and that comes up in my life a lot. If somebody says something and I don't want, then like it's like hard to be like, no, I don't want that, no, and stand for it. Like sometimes I can be like, no, I don't want that, and they can be like, no, you do, and I can be like, okay, I'm gonna go just go over here.
What lets you know to avoid standing up for not wanting that?
I mean, sometimes it's like, well, this thing isn't a big deal, and so I don't actually like care enough to have the argument because I have this fear of arguments, and like disagreement and conflict, and so sometimes I'm just like, it's just not worth it, and sometimes I'm like, I don't, and sometimes I'm like, it's not a big deal, like whatever, it's fine, but then I'm, no, actually. I have to turn around and come back to actually feel about it. And I've been working on doing that more. So yeah, there's that disagreement of like, I don't want something the same way as someone else, but then there's also like, if somebody says something that I don't believe is factually true, like that's also really hard for me to come back to. And like, I mean, not even come back, but like in that moment to say like that I don't think that's actually a fact according to what I know of science.
Or actually standing in like the tension of saying, I disagree with you.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because there, and the fear there is like, oh, if I say somebody was factually wrong, mistaken, then I'm like embarrassing. Sometimes even if it's just two of us, like I'm embarrassing them and like, making them wrong and calling them out, and it's going to be embarrassing and not feel good to them, and I shouldn't do it.
And when they don't feel good, what does that mean about you?
Like, it means that I was like a bad person to embarrass. like I was hurtful.
Yeah, Kevin, I think it just comes back down to shame again.
Well, and shame, and in that instance, I'm thinking rejection.
Yeah.
Where if I call you out on something that was, you say something, I think it's wrong, it's incorrect, well then I called you out on it, so now you're going to just reject me wholeheartedly, like I'm just not, that person's just not even going to deal with me at all going forward. And then that rejection, that being ostracized kind of thing is devastating to a human or a mammal, really. Being ostracized.
So the image that came up for me, Kora, was like you're taking a stick and you're poking a bear, right? And the bear could just like raise its ugly big head and just swap you and you would die, right? The flip that I have is like what the bear is lying on top of is like something you really value. Like the first thing that popped in my head was like your baby's under there, so you have to save your baby, and like of course you're gonna have to poke the bear so that you can save your baby. Like that's the feeling for me. Like there's so much at stake for you either way, you know what I mean? And so like that conflict feels really like do I save my baby or do I just like stay safe? It's so bizarre.
That's an interesting conundrum. And like
because you're advocating for yourself in that moment, right? Like you're saying like, wait, I don't like, actually I don't, what you said, it doesn't seem right or whatever,
Right. And what's the risk of advocating for yourself?
It's not, well, it sounds
and it's
like,
that fear, the fear of that risk of what's the consequence if I advocate for myself. I might hurt them, I might embarrass them, but how is that affecting me?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there might be some kind of fear for you there, Cindy, that like you're going to be put in some position where it's like save a baby or yourself, or like, it's like that rock in a hard place thing.
Yeah, and I'm naming it a big exaggeration, but like in terms of like what the nervous system might be experiencing.
That like in what you were saying that I felt. And also I want to say that I think I'm particularly sensitive to generalizations, but I want to point out, and that's somewhat a semantic thing, and like that can be a fun. I just want to point out for people watching and people who are newer to things, that each of these particular things we're talking about doesn't usually apply to everyone. Like you were listing your like, I think four things that you think it boils down to, Kevin, and I thought those were all really like powerful things. I want to point out that like it's not that all of those are things for everyone. Like there are people, like the one that I've had a clear experience about is rejection. Like I'm slightly sensitive to rejection. Like I don't like rejection, and like maybe if I get rejected over and over and over again for like 5 times in a row about the same thing, then I'm gonna be like, like I don't like that. But I've also come across people, and I've seen it be a thing for some men where like they've already received a lot of rejection, and even getting one rejection in a new situation
can be a massive trigger.
way more painful and triggering for them. And so I want to acknowledge that we're not like all wounded around all of these core things. Like some of us are healthy in some ways and shaken up.
Who? I'm joking.
You can reject me once and I'm okay.
Oh man, yeah, no, I'm not that. Please don't reject me.
but like different levels, and so I think that's where it's great to notice, for everybody to notice like what things feel stronger and like feel more alarming and like you really resonate with, and what things are like, oh yeah, I can understand that, you know, being a sympathetic human, but maybe don't stir up as much. And I also wanted to say, I also wanted to acknowledge, based on what I was originally saying, that the thing that I was talking about, where I was like throwing myself into things and like having new experiences, and where I learned a lot from that. I think that our topic of standing in fear is like another level beyond that. I don't think that like going and then like pushing myself into something and having a new experience is the same thing as standing in fear. Like that's another level of like taking a breath and like being more present.
Yeah, I mean, I would have it as,
I agree with you too.
yeah, I would have it as a healthy middle between those kind of two opposites, right? Like throwing myself unconsciously into fear as a numbing response, and you know, avoiding fear at all costs as a you know, non-confronting response. And then there's the like being with it presently for long periods as I can in order to have the experience that's available. And we only have a few minutes left. I'm just wondering, does anybody want to talk about like either how they've kind of stood in the face of fear or something like that, or maybe the benefits, or how they've noticed their life or their practice shift as a result?
I have something to say, but I want you guys to say it.
Say it.
No, you guys go.
So something that I did to start out with, and like I said, I think that throwing myself in as an older teenager and young adult was a really great step. Like, was progress versus just being on one extreme. But what I did, some of following that, was some of that slowing down in smaller steps. And then I also did a lot of writing, starting when I was like in my mid-20s. I started doing this one specific writing practice, of listing fears and fears underneath those fears, and like starting to like dig in a certain way and put it all on paper, and share that with somebody and be witnessed neutrally, and in that way like start to like move it out a little bit to where it was like more separate from me and where I had more perspective on it, and then make choices based on that in terms of throwing myself in sometimes and avoiding sometimes, and taking smaller steps and working on being able to lean in and practicing that. And it has had huge positive effects.
Yeah, that's really cool. The slowing down, the writing things out, taking your time with it. That sounds like it could be really helpful. Like that's something that maybe I should try.
Yeah, I think slowing down is really powerful. Slowing down and breathing and noticing something that doesn't scare me, and noticing what I notice about it, about the thing that does, those things.
Good.
I think for me, I think what Keith said it before about, or maybe it was Cindy, I can't remember now, but about, you know, the more something matters to me, the more inclined I am to face whatever fear it is, or deal with whatever fear it is. And I guess my mode of operation tends to be to understand as much as I can about whatever that is, to understand what the hurdle really is for me, and the more I can understand it, and I guess bring it from my subconscious to my conscious, which is kind of what Keith was talking about earlier. If I can get that into my conscious brain and realize, oh, I can manage this. I mean, I can deal with this. And that can take time. I mean, to work through all of that. I don't always just
Yeah.
figure it out.
Oh, that's
Um,
actually
yeah.
another really good aspect of this. Sorry, it just has gotten louder and louder in your,
It's just,
background.
I don't, yeah,
So
they're doing some weird setup and the kids are running like crazy.
sorry. So I'm just going to keep
Just
you
keep me
muted.
muted,
It
it's
just is interrupting the audio out here.
Yeah.
So the other good point about that, Kevin, is it's another argument for standing in the face of fear, because it does take time. And if you do it in small enough chunks as a sustained practice, as something that you do over and over and over again, then you can actually, that's what changes the unconscious mind's perception of evidence versus imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Small steps over time. You just put yourself on mute, Keith, so we stop being able to hear you.
Oh, you're back. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, you're back.
No. Years. Yeah. Yeah.
You were saying that the throwing oneself in thing is a numbing technique, which it had a lot of that effect on me. But I think the avoiding and withdrawing thing is also numbing in a way. Like it's like trying to avoid the thing and like not, and then like eventually like not even look that direction. It's like putting blinders on ourselves that we then like habituate to. Yeah, exactly. And what I was going to say about that is that went on for more of my life, and I was still, as I started to work on this stuff, I was still like surprised at how numb I was, and like how many layers of numbness. And that's where the small steps in practice come in, because like I can like feel it. I can feel it a little bit in taking a small step, more than I have before perhaps, but there's still like a lot under there, and like a lot of numbness that I had to work through with that practice over time. I would love to do.
And what did you say? Did you say fear inventory?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea. Yeah, what I was talking about listing fears and fears underneath the fears. It's an inventory process, inventorying all.
Yeah, I think I need to do that exercise, because as we've talked, like in the last half hour, I've been thinking like, man, I think I've got some like major blocks going on where nothing's even gonna come out. Like I can't even. I feel like there's some fears back in there in my brain somewhere, and that's as far as I've gotten. But there's some big block, so I'm gonna breathe.
Well, you could
Something might be in there.
I can share this thing in the Union Life about how to go through this process, and you can write one, and maybe you can get on and share yours as an example if it feels like something you want to share in a private group.
Yeah, we'll see if I can find it and tap into it. I feel like it's like buried or something.
The process will help.
Yeah.
So it is.
It's still pretty loud over here. So I'm actually going to go first and I'll mute myself again. The one thing I want everyone to take away is that fear comes from the oldest part of our brain, which is the critter brain. And the only way to move fear, like really, really like sustainably move fear, is to actually come into a space of safety and then look at what that thing is. If you're stressed out, if you have a lot of cortisol going on, if you're in a place in your life when you're in a situation or environment where like it's really difficult to get into a sense of safety, it might be not the time for you to actually confront your fear. So I really recommend seeing someone or finding friends who are very, very safe for you and like cling on to them because they are your lifeline. NLP is also really great work around working through beliefs and taking the critter brain and rewiring some things. Now I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you. I will say that if you have some fear or a specific fear that you think you might be avoiding or know that you're stuck around, then try and also share the thing that Keith suggested, which has been really great for me. But try the breaking it down into small steps, and like, even if you're like, this is hopeless and I've like tried a small step before and it was too triggering, like it really is powerful to break it down into even smaller steps than you think is possible. Like what's an even smaller step, and like what's an even smaller step, and really do try things around that and experiment around that in ways that feel safe and like they could be healing for you. Because if they don't do anything, like if you think like, oh, this is ridiculous because it's so small, and they don't do anything, then you're not doing anything wrong. But if they do even a little bit, if they get you even a little bit of progress, then that's more powerful than most people think. And so really do give a presentation to your favorite stuffed animals. Like, even though it seems silly, try it. And if you think it helped a little bit, try it again.
Cool. When I think about fear and how much talk it is, I sort of started at the top of the hour with this. I think about what are we afraid of, and I think the fear is, a lot of it is pain related, and it started with a physical pain, but as our species has evolved, the pain that we're fearing and trying to avoid is more often emotional than physical. And then the four items that comes down to, for me, most often is shame, judgment, neglect, and rejection. Although there are others, but that's kind of the four that I've landed on. So with that said, there's still a lot of work I need to do, but I think for me, when I confront something in terms of understanding it, breaking it down into pieces, trying to find the root, what am I really afraid of, and what are the consequences of that? What are the end consequences? That helps me work through it, and it's not like Keith was saying, it's not like a 1 hour thing. I mean, it's something that I'm thinking on for days, for weeks, for months. It might come back, months later, like, what was really going on there? What was I really afraid of? And then with the emotional, more often than not, it's usually something that I can work through pretty well, I think, usually. But like I said, there could still be some major blocks going on that I'm just really missing. So I'll have to work on that.
Woo!
Do you guys have any offerings?
I mean, I'll go real quick. Just the Uchi app is available for download. We just launched a new release, an updated release last week. So all new features and great time, coming into the holidays, connecting offline so that your online connections are even stronger.
Sweet. Yes. So I am cultivating the Union Life Group. And and I also offer one-on-one coaching, and am feeling really inspired about group coaching, and so I am working on creating as far as that goes. But right now I'm offering the one-on-one coaching, and I'm cultivating the Union Life Group. So please join, and I will share about what we were a tool that we were talking about today, and much more. I won't say more about it now.